I've been taken through this process with a big book step study sponsor and a loving higher power, made most of my amends, and stand ready to make any more that crop up. And I try to live the solution 10, 11, and 12 to the best of my willingness on a daily basis. Okay. I want to thank Chris for asking me to speak tonight. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to do that. And just to let you guys know, I always take notes before I start. So if I'm looking down a little bit, it's, please forgive me, but I have to watch my notes because I'm not able to speak off the cuff yet, but I'll get there. So anyway, step 5. In order to begin to talk about step 5, I think that what we have to do is go back to the first 4 steps quickly because they're all so enmeshed. And one helps out the other and the other and the other and on the continuum. So, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. That was our step 1. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 2. We put faith in a higher power and made a commitment to him in step 3. And then we were encouraged to take a fearless moral inventory of ourselves in step 4. That sets us up for the beginning to tackle step 5. But step 4 actually, I felt like I had run a marathon race after I finished step 4. It was very intense and it was a lot of writing and a lot of work. However, it was cathartic and made me feel so much better. Step 4 provided us with the background for step 5, by helping us make this searching and moral inventory. And that in turn, step 5 in turn sets us up for step 6, which we will study next week, and which is all about humility. And, it helps us to have God remove all our we ask God to remove all our defects of character. So in step 5, we have to admit our shortcomings and problematic behaviors that we've had in the past that we identified when we made the moral inventory in step 4. We admitted these character defects to ourselves and to a higher power in step 4. Now we have to admit them to another person. And excuse me, it may seem like a difficult step to accomplish, but it isn't about criticizing ourselves for our prior wrongs and our character flaws, which of course we all have. What has happened is really in the past. And what step 5 is really about is for us to be able to acknowledge our mistakes and and then to actively or proactively, if you will, let go of our former way of life. And that's a big step. Step 4 helped us take responsibility for our actions. So the next step is to release these defects by sharing them with someone else, a trusted person who's not going to judge you. And, just like so many of the other steps, we have to pocket our pride, as it says in the reading. And this is an essential step so that we can make positive changes in our life. And to me, the 3 essential components to step 5 is like, it's an admission to God, it's an admission to ourselves, and it's an admission to some other person. Having been brought up in the Catholic faith, I kind of correlate this with a confession. And, having been brought up, as I said, my mother was a French Canadian Catholic, and my father was a Presbyterian, but he turned Catholic and said his rosaries on his knees every night until the day he died. So, we had to go to confession a lot, if not every week, every couple of weeks. And when you're 10 years old, you don't have a whole lot of sins, that you want to talk to the priest about and let him know. I forgot my morning prayers, or I forgot my evening prayers. I argued with my brother. I wised off to my mother, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But this 3-part confession that we have in our admission to God, what that does, it does 3 things. It creates a spiritual foundation for our healing, and it helps us to release our shame and guilt, which is very important. And then we begin to build trust in our higher power's ability to forgive us for the things that we did. When we do an admission/confession to ourselves, that breaks down our denial patterns in the that was a big one for me. I was always in denial about my disease, about whose fault it was. It was always somebody else's fault. I never admitted it was my fault. We had to, and when we admit to ourselves, we have to make sure that we are completely honest about our past behaviors. We can't sweep anything under the rug, and we have to be thorough. And that also strengthens our self-awareness from when we did write our inventory in our prior step. And so the last confession is an admission to another person. And, speaking for myself, I used my sponsor. I think a lot of us alcoholics do that. And for me, it was impossible for me to think about telling a priest all the stuff that I had. Like I thought I would never get out of the confessional. So it was not something I could do. My sponsor had been through the same thing. She had to go through a step 4, fearless and moral inventory. She had to read her inventory to her sponsor and get feedback. And that's what my sponsor did with me too. She gave me feedback. She asked me if, there was anything that she was confused about. She asked me to explain a little bit more. There were a couple of things that and we had to do this during the pandemic. We were in lockdown, major lockdown at that time. And so we couldn't even do this in person. We had to do it, where, most people get together and they light a candle for God and put a chair there for God, and then read, your 5th step to him. I did that part of it at my house, but we had to do it over the phone because we were not able to see each other. So it was a little bit different than sitting face to face with somebody and doing reading step 5. But admitting to another person, besides using your sponsor to help you get through this, it brings some of our thoughts and actions into the light, and we are more apt to see a little bit more clearly. And it provides a perspective, another perspective on our character defects. So, I mean, the spiritual growth that we as alcoholics experience during step 5, it's going to transform our relationship with ourselves, with our higher power, with our sponsor, or whoever we read our 5th step to. And what it's going to help us do is help us to release guilt and shame, to begin to trust in our recovery, to develop some spiritual awareness, which hopefully will continue to grow, and we'll experience humility, which, as I said, we'll talk about next week. The thing about in the reading that I like so much is the promises that are given to us. And if you do this and you do it on a complete and honest basis, because when I was reading my 5th step to my sponsor, since we weren't in person, I would turn the page and go, no, that's not really important. She doesn't really want to hear about that. And then I thought to myself, no, I'm defeating the purpose if I do not go through everything, every single thing that I wrote about, as awful as I might think it is. You can't skip anything. And the promises tell us that if we are honest and thorough and complete, all of these things are going to happen to us. We're going to, let me get back here a minute here. We're going to be able to look the world in the eye. And that's an important one for me, because there were several times I couldn't look anybody in the eye because I was so ashamed and so guilt-ridden and unhappy. And we can be alone at peace, perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall away from us. All of these things that are mentioned in this paragraph are the promises that are going to come true for us if we excuse me, are going to come true for us if we do exactly what the directions tell us to do. And it's not hard. It's not hard directions. We can do it. Our recovery process has to excuse me, I got a tickle, is going to have to proceed on a continuum for the rest of our lives. Each step brings us closer to achieving long-term sobriety. And, this program is not magic. Nobody's going to sprinkle fairy dust over you and say, boom, you're cured. You are no longer an alcoholic. It requires work. It requires hard work. And yet, on the other side of all that hard work is going to be a spiritual experience that you will never forget, and that will be part of your life, for the rest of your life. The program offers us a template with which we can reach our desired goal of peace, spirituality, awareness, one piece and one step at a time. And I believe that that's all I have. I want to thank you all for listening to me. I hope I was able to provide a little bit of insight for you guys, and I hope I didn't jump around too much and confuse you all. So again, Eric, thank you very much for asking me to speak. It was an honor and a privilege, and I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you all.